Hello, I'm Richard Murphy. I recently did a video on why I believe that the accounts of multinational corporations that are sometimes also called public interest entities or PIEs are works of fiction because they show such a limited and very selected view of the transactions that are undertaken by those organisations. But I want to offer another different perspective upon the accounting of these organisations now, which is again the basis of the submission that I am making to the UK's Financial Reporting Council on why their vision of future financial reporting by such companies in the UK is wrong. They maintain the belief, which I think is incorrect, that these organisations are what are called microeconomic entities. Now, in microeconomics and in the theory of the firm, it is basically assumed as a working assumption that no one organisation is big enough to influence the activities of a market as a whole. Now, of course, we all do know that that isn't always true, that there are monopolists, there are oligopolists and so on. But the working assumption remains in the reporting of accounts that this is nonetheless true, that the organisation is only concerned with its own activities because there's a big market out there which it can't influence and to which it therefore does not have to account. Now suppose that isn't true. Suppose that public interest entities are actually of public interest. And you might think that rather odd because of course by definition they must be, but this thought has not yet occurred to accountants. And if they are of public interest, that is not because they are microeconomic entities, but because they actually have macroeconomic influence. Now, when you begin to think about this, it becomes glaringly obviously true. Think about some very large organisations. For example, Amazon supplies a very large part of the file server capacity that keeps many governments, including part of the UK government, going. Think about how we would work without Google, and you suddenly realise that actually it is part of our macroeconomy now. Think about our banks, which are too big to fail, as we know. They are therefore deeply embedded and absolutely critical to the macroeconomic success of the UK economy. I could keep going, but the same is also true of many of our supermarkets, which clearly we would have great difficulty with surviving out, and many other entities, the national grid, for example. Literally, if it did not function, the UK would cease to work. Now, if this is true, and I think it's indisputable that it is, then why are we letting these organisations account as if their only interests of concern are to their shareholders and maybe to those who lend them money, when quite clearly what they do, how they do it, in whose interest they do it, and with what consequence are matters that must be of enormous significance to all the rest of us. Suppose these organisations were, like government, which is of course normally identified as macroeconomic activity, required to account for the impact of their spending on the communities that they serve. In other words, their spending on people would matter more. So we would want more information on it and where it is incurred and what pay differentials there were and what the pay bands right across the company might be and whether there was a significant gender difference not just in total but even across those pay bands and whether there were also pay band differentials with regard to race or other discrimination. What about how they spend money into the economy? Is it spent in the UK or is it spent out of the UK? Are they spending on renewable resources or non-renewable resources? How does this fit into their overall impact assessment on the economy of which they are a part? We could keep going on this. The point is, and perhaps by the way when I say we could keep going, we could ask for much more information about tax, including the VAT they pay, the PAYE they pay, and many other things which are currently excluded from the accounts. My point is simply this. These companies are so big that they cannot be considered to be independent of the economy as a whole. They are actually integral to our macroeconomy. And the more and more that our government outsources, and that does appear to still be the policy of this government, then the more integral they are, and therefore the more accountable they should be. In that case, the assumption that we are really not very interested in what they spend, but are only interested in their turnover and their profit, and maybe the tax that they pay on profits alone, is completely wrong. We need to know much more about how they actually impact as a whole upon the economy of the UK and those other places where they are. Now, of course, by definition, many of these organisations are multinational. That, therefore, also means that we need to know this information split by country, because their macroeconomic effect will vary from place to place. Therefore, we cannot do without country-by-country reporting, and indeed in many cases we can't do without individual subsidiary reporting by them as well, which requires that they put all the accounts of every subsidiary that they have on public record so that we can see the information free of charge to make sure what is going on, because they are public interest entities, and therefore we as the public must have our interest in them satisfied. It really does follow from the definition. But this is not happening, and accounting has to change to recognise this if we are going to get meaningful information that can be presented for audit and checked to be true and fair, so that proper decisions can be made upon the macroeconomy in the future in which these companies play such a vital part. This is not some peripheral issue. This is now at the very core of the questions that we need to ask about how our whole economy is managed, and accounting is central to that, and therefore reform is essential if we are to get the data that we need, and government is also to get the data it needs to be able to check what is really going on here in the UK right now, and in every other country around the world as well. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in what I've been saying in this video, please subscribe. There is a button below the viewing screen. If you're interested in what I have to say on Twitter, I'm at Richard J. Murphy on that medium. If you want to look at my blog, that's taxresearch.org.uk, and we have a Facebook page as well, Richard J. Murphy. So one of those things will get you more information on what this video series is about, and I hope I'll see you again soon.